Welcome back. Now we're gonna discuss functions. So far you have written code with no reuse. Without any reuse, you can write logic, but you'll have to write that logic again and again, again and again. Now functions help you pack your logic in a bag that you can use it again and again, again and again, 1,000 million times, whenever, however times you want to use it. For example, that print function, that was a function itself that you have used it 1,000 times. Now, let me show you how to write a function yourself. To write a function, this is the syntax. First thing you do is you define the function using the def keyword, then you write the name, fun name, which is most probably always a verb. Again, you can name anything you want to name it, but it's a good thing that it's a verb, right? So because it is doing something, there's a logic here. Now let's say, well, this is the fun name. This thing right here, it takes the parameters, and you can pass no parameters, or you can pass infinite number of parameters, how many parameters you want. Then this colon, of course, you know the Python syntax, and this, you make sure that there is 4 spaces here. This is just the way syntax in Python language is performed. You have to have these 4 spaces, and it tells you that this is the body of this function. Just like in the for loops, we saw that. Now let's say this function just prints, you called me. I can run this now, python functions.py, and we'll run just fine. But I didn't call it. And when you call the function, that's when this thing gets executed. So let's say I now call it. Now this thing will get executed, and you will see you called me is printed on the screen. Now, but this is not a fun function, right? It's just printing stuff. Now you saw that when you called the length function, like this one, this returned the length of the thing that you passed inside. Well, let's just create a function that returns something, right? Let's say I return 34. Now I can store the value that this function returns, which is 34. Calling this function again, these brackets, and that's it. In these brackets you give the parameters, which I have not given so far, so don't worry about those parameters yet. Let's run this again, and this will give you 34. Now the fun begins. How do we give it parameters? Why do we use parameters? Parameters are the ones that generalize, right? You have a problem that is used everywhere for all the values of a parameter, right? For example, calculating a, let's say from looking at a picture, well, you have to pass in a picture that a program will calculate for. So and you can call these variables anything. These are like variables that store the information that is passed to a function. Let's say I pass just one parameter and I return the square of that parameter, means it is multiplied 2 times. So param1 multiplied by param1 is returned. If I do this, it should give me 4, as you will see now, because 4 is the square of 2, and we made a function that calculates square of a number. Now you can pass as much parameters as you want here. I can pass param2, I can pass param3, I can do crazy logic here. I can say, well, x is equal to param1 multiplied by 23, then param3 is equal to param3 multiplied by 99, then value is equal to param1 plus param2 plus param3. Like, all this logic, it's this body, and don't be confused with this x and this x. This x is in this body. All these variables are just in this scope, are in this little world of a function, right? Remember that. And return this value. Now I have to pass in 3 more parameters. This function does this stuff right here, and it returns you the value 3401. Cool. Now this is all you need to know for a function. It takes parameters and it returns values. That's all a function does. Now let's do something fun with our knowledge of creating functions. Let's write a function for even numbers. Is even. as we have written the logic for this function before in the different videos and lectures, I'm gonna not explain this, but you know that it's divided by 2. 2, 4, 6, 8 are even numbers and 3, 5, 7 are odd numbers, and I can just return this very easily. Now the interesting things happen. Now of course I can run this function and print the value. I can just directly print it. Whatever this function returns is even. Well, is 2 even? Well, definitely it is even. I made a mistake there, and number is not defined because it's num, not number. No problem. We run this again and you will see that it's true because 2 is an even number. But I want to explain you something about the return values. And when the return is called, anything that is below that thing will not run. For example, normally you would say you would print a value, then everything below would run. I can print anything here and this will never print, because what return does, it just closes the function. Function is over. Function has done its job. It is returning you the value. It doesn't have to do anything else. So I do this and true. It doesn't print anything. It just does this. Now let's move on and figure out some other stuff. Now you can define a function as long as you can, well, make sure that the indentation is not wrong. Now this is something that I want you to make sure that you don't mess up, because everything right here is the function body. This is not the function body. This right here, 4 spaces later, this is the indentation of Python language. This is very important. Now let's talk about recursion. Recursion is an optional topic. You don't need to know it, but I have to show you what it is about. It's very important because it's efficient than a while loop. It is definitely like repeating stuff. But let me show you what it is, then you'll understand. Recursion is calling a function inside a function. But when you're calling a function inside a function, you might think that it will run forever. But there is something called a recursive step and there is something called an end condition. Let me write a countdown function for you. And in a countdown function, if x is equal to 1, you stop and x is equal to 1, and you just return 1. Right? And if that is not the case, well, you also print 1, print x. And if that is not the case, you don't have to go into else, you just return the countdown, because as I said, it's not a problem when you returned. This will always work. Now let's call this function and see what happens. We also have to print here. I'll explain it to you in a moment. As you can see, it counts down starting from 9 till 1. Now what happened here? Well, it's a little complicated than it looks. First of all, x is 9 in the beginning. It's not 1, it's 9. It's going to print 9 right away, then it's going to return the function itself. It's going to create this, well, it's going to call the function -1. 8 is going to go in the parameter, then it's going to print 8 again and again until it reaches this x equals 1. When x is 1, it just prints that and it returns that value. It doesn't go anywhere else. It doesn't call these functions. Now I'm not going to go into too much detail because the implementation is a little more different than that. You don't have it like a for loop. This is not a loop. This is just calling the function inside a function, and then it just keeps calling that function again and again. So that's a little complicated, and I don't want to go down that route, making your day any more worse than it already is. I'm sorry. So now let's talk about lambda expressions. And lambda expressions are just anonymous functions. So what is an anonymous function? Anonymous functions are used in a lot of places. They are not accessible after they are created, and they have no identity. So you can just you can just call this function like a body of logic, but just not defined. You can save it in a variable. Let me show you in here, because you can do this easily here with the terminal. We will use lambda expressions, so don't worry, in the next section where we will create our own application. Now let me show you that For example, I take a lamb variable. Now lambda is the way you define the lambda expression. Lambda is a keyword. This right here is a keyword, remember that. Then argument 1 is a parameter. You can pass many parameters as you want, and this is the body. You don't have to write the return here, it will automatically return. Now if I call lamb of 2, it'll give me 4 because multiplying that by 2. 545, it'll be 1090. So this is it for functions. I don't want to go in too much detail, but as far as you know about days, you can write this, you're golden. You don't have to worry about anything else. So you have to worry about this later, but you're a beginner, so don't worry about anything else. Make sure that you know how to write this function and it's not a problem for you. Now I would encourage you to write a function that calculates the actual length of a string. I know it's a little different and you already have that defined, so please pause the lecture and go and write a function that calculates the length of a string. You done? Have you written the function? Now let me show you how that's done. And I'm sure that you have written it, but not a big deal. So instead of calling a calculate, instead of calling the length method here, we're calculating our own, making our own method, which is not reserved. The len is not a reserved key. Calculate len is not a reserved keyword in Python. String, I would call it s. So how do you calculate its length? Well, first of all, you just need to create a loop that calculates its length, and you can just use a while loop to just make things simpler. And even though we're using the length method here, it's just calculating it at the end of the day. So if I print the calculate length method, it is 1 2 3 4 5 6 7, it should give me 7 back. As you can see right there. So it's not that important to make this function, but just to get into the indentation and the body of the function, make sure that you understand these concepts. And I'll see you in the next lecture now.